It was my wife's sister's birthday. They made $900 million in profit last year, and every cent could be traced back to a line of code I wrote in my pajamas at 3 a.m. But guess who got handed the company? Not me. It happened somewhere between the lobster risotto and the second round of Cristal. My father-in-law, Phil, stood up. Tall, smug, the kind of man who always looked like he knew something you didn't. "I've been thinking a long time about legacy," he said, raising a toast. "And I realized something tonight." He paused for effect, loved doing that. Half the room leaned in. "Legacy," he repeated, "is about vision. About knowing where things are going before they get there." He turned toward the other side of the table and handed the company papers to my wife's sister's boyfriend, Nathan. Freshly minted MBA. Slick smile. Zero achievements. The same guy who once asked me if RAM was short for random account money. "You," Phil said to him, "have always been a real visionary." The room applauded like it was scripted. Even my wife smiled, tight-lipped, but she smiled. My mouth dried out. When the noise died down, I stood up, slow and deliberate, walked to Phil, and said, "Why?" He didn't blink. Just reached into his blazer, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and pressed it into my palm like I was a valet. "For your next idea," he said with a grin. I nodded. Said nothing. Not because I had no words. No, I had plenty. I just knew they didn't deserve them. I walked out. Quiet. Calm. Calculated. I went home. Didn't say a word to my wife. Didn't sleep. Just stared at the wall in my office, the one covered in whiteboards and flowcharts. The map of everything I'd given them. Everything they now believed was theirs. And that night, something inside me clicked. They thought the code I wrote was theirs? Let them think that. Because what they didn't know was this: I had built in a sleeper protocol. Not malicious. Not destructive. Just invisible. A contingency. For myself. For control. A little bit of digital DNA that said, "This empire breathes because I allow it to." At 4:17 a.m., I activated the trigger. Not a shutdown. Not a delete. Just a removal. The architecture stayed. The infrastructure stayed. But every core process, the decision engine, the real-time analytics, the automation backbones, they reverted to sandbox mode. Which meant, effectively, the business was there. But the mind behind it? Gone. The next morning, I had coffee at the same little cafe I used to code in back when none of them knew my name. Watched the sun rise over a city that used to belong to them. And at 9:06 a.m., I got the first text. What the hell is going on? Then a call from Phil. I let it go to voicemail. They walked into the office expecting to be kings. What they found was a palace made of shadows. The mainframe? Inaccessible. Customer dashboards? Frozen. Predictive analytics? Offline. And Nathan, the visionary, he couldn't even log into the admin console. They screamed. They raged. And I smiled. Because I wasn't done yet. By the time they realized what had happened, I was already 6 hours and 2 lattes deep into building something better. Cleaner. Sleeker. Mine. Phil called again. Then Nathan. Then, oddly enough, my wife. That one hit a little different. Not because I cared what she had to say, but because she only ever called me when she needed something. I didn't answer. Let the silence echo. They wanted to treat me like a ghost? Fine. I'd haunt the whole damn company. You see, back when I first joined the family business, let me rephrase that. Back when I rescued it from the jaws of digital extinction, I didn't just write code. I built the nervous system of the entire operation. I built the tech stack. I mapped the data pipelines. I restructured the CRM, the forecasting models, even the inventory AI. I didn't join their company. I became it. But because I didn't dress like Nathan, because I didn't flirt with exec wives at galas or quote Steve Jobs over canapes, they assumed I was replaceable. That they could hand the keys over to a suit and I just, what? Keep the engine running? They wanted a figurehead. A photo op someone pretty in a tailored blazer. They forgot who wired the brakes. Around 11:30 a.m., I got a message from Marcos, one of the lead engineers. Hey man, all the backend systems are glitching. Analytics panel went dark. Something weird's happening. You okay? I stared at the message. Marcos was one of the few decent ones. He showed up early. Asked real questions. Once offered me half his sandwich when I forgot lunch during a 19-hour debug sprint. I replied, nothing's wrong. Just a reminder. 2 minutes later. Reminder of what? I didn't answer. He'd figure it out. They all would. Meanwhile, I opened my private repository. Version 2.0. Codenamed Aegis. You see, what I built for them was good. Great. Even. But what I was building now, this wasn't just a business platform. It was a fortress. A living thing. It learned. It adjusted. It defended. No more legacy constraints. No more compromise to cater to some board of sunburnt fossils who thought machine learning was something Alexa did on Tuesdays. And most importantly, it had no fingerprints but mine. That afternoon, I finally picked up Phil's call. I said nothing. Just waited. Where are you? He snapped. In the middle of something, I replied. The system's gone haywire. You need to fix this. I smiled. Not my system anymore. You listen here, you little. I'm listening, Phil. What's next? You gonna hand Nathan another $100? Maybe a sandwich to go with it. Silence. Fine, he said after a beat. We'll pay you. Consulting fee. Whatever you want. Now that was rich. The same man who gave me $100 as a parting insult was now offering to hire me back. Like I was some IT intern he could leash with a decent paycheck. I'm not for sale, I said. What do you want? There it was. The sound of a man with no moves left. I let that question hang. I wanted it to eat at him. I wanted him to lie awake tonight wondering how many of his fake smiles I remembered, how many of his patronizing nods I filed away like daggers I'd one day throw back. Finally, I said, you'll find out tomorrow. Then I hung up. And that night, while they held emergency meetings and scrambled to understand the system they never took the time to learn, I launched Aegis in stealth mode. It was beautiful, flawless, secure, and completely incompatible with their archaic infrastructure. It wasn't just a better system. It was a new beginning. Mine. They tried to steal my future and got stuck in the past. And the best part? I wasn't even close to finished. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Nah, that's too poetic. Revenge is a ledger. Every insult, every slight, every eye roll when I opened my mouth in meetings, every conversation where Nathan repeated my ideas like they were his and got applause, those were debts. And now? Time to collect. The morning after the system failure, the headlines hit like war drums. Industry shock. Family-owned Titan suffers sudden digital collapse, alleged internal sabotage. They used words like alleged and internal, but we all knew. Anyone who had ever seen me type knew. They weren't just exposed, they were naked in a snowstorm, and the world was watching. By 9 a.m., my wife showed up. Not a text. Not a call. She rang the doorbell like a stranger. I opened the door in a hoodie and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Can we talk? Her tone was soft. Practiced. Like she'd been rehearsing it in the mirror. Sure, I said, stepping aside. Let's talk. She walked into my home office. The same one she used to complain was too cluttered with computer crap. Now she sat in the chair across from me like a job candidate about to beg for a second interview. I didn't know they were going to do that, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear like that ever worked on me. The $100. Nathan. None of it was my idea. I nodded. Let her talk. Let her feel heard. That was always her favorite phrase. I just want to feel heard. So you didn't know, I said. No, she said, too fast. I swear. I turned my monitor. Opened an email. Hit print. The sheet slid out of the printer like judgment from above. I passed it to her. It was a forwarded email from her to her mother, dated 3 days before the birthday party. Subject line, Nathan's promotion. It's finally happening, party popper. Her face went pale. I held up a hand. Let me help you out. You didn't know. You didn't agree. You weren't involved. You're innocent. That about cover it. Tears welled in her eyes. Too late. Too fake. She had to tell. She always blinked too fast when she was performing. You were supposed to be my partner, I said. My voice was quiet. Calm. Clinical. Instead, you sold front row seats to my execution. And then smiled through the credits. That's not fair. You're right. I cut in. You know what's fair? This. I pulled out another piece of paper. This one had 3 lines. Company operating system. Locked. IP ownership. Reassigned. Patent filings. Complete. She scanned it. Didn't understand it. That was part of the problem, really. What is this? It's the future, I said. Mine. Not yours. Not Phil's. And definitely not Nathan's. Are you going to ruin us? I let that question float between us. Ruin? No. That would be mercy. I was going to dismantle them. Let them live long enough to feel the weight of their decisions pressed down on every breath. I'm going to do one better, I said. I'm going to let you all keep the company. Keep the name. Keep the building. Hell, keep the monogram mucks. Her brow furrowed. Confused. But the soul of it, the thing that made it valuable, is gone. And in its place, you have Nathan, the man who once told me we should install more bandwidth to speed up the cloud. Her mouth opened. Closed. No words. Good. By the way, I said, check your inbox later today. For what? For your real inheritance. She left without another word. That night, at exactly 5 p.m., I launched the press release. Introducing Aegis Core, built by the architect behind $900 million in profits, now independent. The name alone told the story. The architect. Not Phil. Not Nathan. Not the family. Me. Within hours, VCs were calling. Tech magazines were reaching out. LinkedIn melted. Everyone wanted to know how they missed the real genius behind the curtain. And meanwhile, Phil's phone stopped ringing. Nathan's inbox filled with confused client cancellations. And my wife's inheritance? It was a framed photo, a screen grab, of a $100 bill, captioned, "For your next idea, love, the real visionary." You ever look back at a memory and realize it was never what you thought it was? That's how I feel about the gala. 6 months before everything blew up, they hosted a black tie fundraiser for some faux charity Phil pretended to care about. Something about digital literacy for underprivileged schools. Ironic, really, since the man didn't know how to CC someone on an email without accidentally replying all. That night? That's when the cracks started showing. But I didn't see it, not then. I was still naive. Still grateful. Still wearing the wrong suit and the right smile. They held it at the Wyndham Pavilion. The kind of place where champagne fountains exist and people say network like it's a virtue. I remember standing at the edge of the ballroom, watching her, my wife, laugh a little too hard at one of Nathan's jokes. The way she brushed invisible lint off his lapel. The kind of gestures that don't register as flirtation until hindsight throws a spotlight on them. I chalked it up to nerves. Social survival. Whatever helped me sleep. That night, I was the +1 to my own legacy. They introduced me like a tech assistant. "This is the guy who keeps our system running," Phil said, patting my shoulder like I was a janitor with a laptop. Not, "This is the man who built the algorithm that saved our family." Not, "This is the reason our profit margins went vertical." Nope. Just the help. And Nathan? He made the rounds like a congressman up for re-election. Handshakes, small talk, fake humility. I caught snippets. "We've been optimizing logistics lately. Our new predictive systems are really changing the game." Well, I'm not a tech guy, but I have a vision, you know? Yeah, Nathan. A vision. One you Xeroxed off my whiteboard. I remember walking past a circle of executives and overhearing a VP from some vendor say, "So you're the guy behind the platform?" Nathan smiled and said, "Guilty." Not a flicker of hesitation. No deflection. Just bold-faced theft, delivered with confidence and a $3,000 suit. I approached him later that night. Tried to stay civil. "Hey, man, I heard what you said back there." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "You let them believe you built it." He grinned. "Relax. It's all just posturing. Everyone knows you're the tech guy." Tech guy. That's what I'd become. Not a partner. Not a creator. Not the mind that had breathed life into a dying empire. Just the guy who makes it work. That's when the first switch flipped in me. I went from grateful to alert. From hopeful to watchful. Because here's the truth. Betrayal never shows up wearing horns. It wears heels and smiles. It hands you a drink and tells you how lucky you are. It laughs at your jokes while memorizing your passwords. And that night, I started noticing the red flags I'd ignored for years. The way Phil always introduced me as the quiet genius, but never invited me to strategy meetings. The way my wife always told me not to overthink it when she came home late from lunches with Nathan and her sister. The way Nathan always leaned just a little too close to her, like gravity owed him favors. So I did what any man with a mind for details would do. I started logging everything. Not in a journal. In a private, encrypted database. Coded from scratch. Hidden inside a dummy file labeled wedding_photos_2017.zip on my personal drive. Cute, right? Inside, I logged conversations. Timestamped actions. Recalled quotes. Every tech update I deployed. Every contribution I made. You see, I wasn't just building software anymore. I was building a timeline. A map. A digital paper trail that, if ever needed, could prove exactly who built the machine they now pretended to own. That gala? That was the beginning. And they never saw it coming. I wasn't looking for it. Not at first. It started with a favor. Phil asked me to review a few documents for feedback, his words, on a new IP transfer deal they were working on. Claimed it was standard procedure, just part of restructuring the family trust. What he didn't count on. I read everything. Twice. Not just the bolded headers or the executive summaries. No, I combed through the appendices, the buried clauses, the ones written in 6-point font and legal camouflage. The kind of language meant to make your eyes glaze over so you'd sign your rights away without knowing it. And tucked between routine asset reallocations and estate language was a line that made the air thin around me. Including, but not limited to, all proprietary systems, algorithms, data models, and intellectual assets developed within the operational scope of the family's digital enterprises, as contributed by affiliated non-shareholding consultants. I read it again, then once more. That single clause? It stripped me clean. All my code, my system architecture, my adaptive analytics, all of it, being quietly claimed and bundled into a legacy trust that would outlive me. Oh, not by the company, but by the family. They weren't just cutting me out of the business. They were cutting me out of history. The inheritance clause wasn't about protecting assets. It was about rewriting authorship. Nathan would get the board seat. My wife would get shares and PR praise for supporting innovation. And me? I'd be the ghost in the machine. I closed the document and stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just done. They thought they were clever. They forgot who wrote the source code. That weekend, while they drank mimosas at some lake house strategy retreat, I launched the Cicada protocol. What is that, you ask? Let me explain. When I first built the platform, I buried a dormant protocol inside the deployment stack. Something small, harmless on the surface. Just a set of redundancy toggles designed to prevent system overload. That's what I told them. In truth, Cicada was a mirror system, a copy of the core platform, running in shadow, tracking every change, every patch, every user behavior. And most importantly, it recorded authorship metadata on every innovation deployed. Me, timestamped, authenticated, digitally notarized. Meaning, if they tried to claim IP rights in court, I could prove, with immutable, real-time logs, that the original creator was not the family, not the company, not Nathan, but me. And Cicada wasn't just a fail-safe. It was admissible. And oh, the best part? It wasn't stored on any of their servers. It was hosted offshore, encrypted, accessible only through a quantum handshake token they didn't even know existed, because I built the key into my smartwatch firmware. Guess what happened next? Phil called me Monday morning. Cheerful. Too cheerful. Hey, son, just checking in. Thought we'd finalize those documents this week, if you're comfortable. Got the lawyers drafting up a final copy. All just a formality. Sure, I said. Send it over. He laughed. That's the spirit. Visionaries like you, man, you're the future of this family. I didn't say it. Not yet. I wanted him to taste the victory he thought he had before I flipped the table. 2 days later, I walked into their board meeting. They had champagne. Nathan was already drunk on power, doing that thing where he gestured with both hands like he was hosting a TED Talk. Phil stood and raised his glass. Let's make it official. I held up the contract. Looked them in the eyes. I've made some red lines. Nathan scoffed. What could you possibly have to edit? I smiled. Clause 14, subsection D. I added a line. Phil leaned in, reading. His lips moved, but his eyes froze. All proprietary digital systems mentioned herein are to remain the sole intellectual property of the originating architect, unless previously waived under separate agreement, none of which currently exist. What the hell is this? Phil asked. Legal proof, I said, of who built your kingdom, and a digital framework you now no longer have access to, unless you renegotiate. With me. Nathan stood. You're bluffing. No, I said, pulling a small USB stick from my pocket and tossing it onto the table. This is a breadcrumb. Run it. You'll find the shadow logs, the source code fingerprints, the IP trail, and the Cicada key. Cicada. I nodded. The thing you never saw coming. Phil didn't speak. He just stared. You can try to fight me, I continued. But discovery will kill you. You'll lose the platform, the contracts, the clients, and the press will eat it alive. Or, we draft a new agreement. One that reflects reality. And what would that look like? Phil asked, his voice tight. I retain ownership. You license it. At a rate, I said. And Nathan? I looked at him. He goes back to doing whatever it is he actually does. Golf, maybe. You could hear the rage bubbling in Nathan's throat. But Phil finally understood. He nodded slowly. You're serious. Dead serious. Nathan didn't take the loss well. Of course he didn't. Guys like him never do. The ones who float through life on inherited charm and secondhand brilliance. The kind of men who grow up hearing they're gifted just because they can speak confidently about things they don't understand. He wasn't used to losing, especially not in a room where everyone used to clap when he coughed. So when the boardroom went quiet and Phil reluctantly nodded at me, the real unraveling began. Not in public. No, Nathan wasn't that stupid. But behind the scenes. The very next day, I got an email from a law firm in Manhattan. Subject, Notice of Potential IP Ownership Conflict, Formal Inquiry. Cute. Nathan was trying to claw back control. Probably convinced himself that if he just found the right lawyer with the right jawline and the right LinkedIn endorsements, he could unravel what I'd built. He forgot who wrote the script he was trying to plagiarize. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to my attorney. Yes, my attorney. Not some inherited family legal drone, but a woman named Bianca who used to prosecute cyber fraud cases for the FBI before opening her own boutique firm. She called me 3 hours later. Laughing. Is this clown serious? She asked. I just ran the metadata chain you embedded in the cicada logs. He'd have better luck convincing a jury that water isn't wet. Still, I said, let's make this hurt. Oh, don't worry, she replied. By the time we're done, he'll be paying licensing fees just to boot his laptop. Meanwhile, I got to work on a little surprise. See, Cicada didn't just keep records, it kept watch. It monitored interactions, observed patterns, learned behaviors, which meant when Nathan tried logging into the old dev portal using a spoofed credential set, Cicada didn't just block him. It mirrored his access attempt. It recorded everything. His IP, his location, the tool he used to bypass security, a second-rate keylogger script he clearly bought off some script kiddie marketplace for $29.99. Rookie mistake. I packaged it all up, screenshots, logs, timestamps, and sent it anonymously to every board member with a subject line that read, FYI, your visionary tried to break in. Again, no message body. Just the truth, laid bare. I don't know what I enjoyed more, the fact that Nathan got blindsided, or the fact that he didn't know I was behind it. See, that's the difference between a hacker and a hero. A hacker breaks things. A hero lets things break themselves. A week later, Nathan's name quietly disappeared from the company's leadership page. Replaced by some interim consultant Phil probably pulled out of retirement to plug the PR leak.